Welcome, everyone. We're thrilled to have you joining us for this special event today. As our corporate partners for the Friends of the Norris Cotton Cancer Center, we want to take this opportunity to thank you so much for your generous continued support. My name is Jacqueline Rodriguez, and I'm honored to be here with you today as the new Executive Director of the Friends. I'm thrilled to be joining the team and working alongside all of you, our partners and volunteers, to help further the mission of the Friends. I look forward to meeting you all very soon, hopefully in person. Because we can't be together in person just yet, we're gathered today on Zoom, so I will start with some housekeeping items for all of us. This session is being recorded. Your video and audio will automatically be turned off for the duration of the event. For technical help, please enter any questions you have in the chat. We want to hear from you. And to submit a question to our speakers and presenters, please enter your questions in the Q&A box, which is separate from the chat box. If you see a question in the Q&A that you would like to have answered, please feel free to vote it up by clicking the thumbs up icon underneath the question. And we will try to get to as many questions as possible today. Thank you for your enthusiasm. To get us started, let's test out our chat. I would love to know where you're joining us from today, and also what organization are you with? And just for fun, the company with the most attendees today will receive a special prize, of course, filled with signature Friends and Proudy gear. So please share in the chat. Don't be shy. Hi, Judy. We're so glad you're with us. Hi there, Jack, Karen, Linda. Hi, Bruce. We're thrilled to have so many joining with us today. Jim, Bethany, we're excited to share just some really special and exciting developments within the Norris Cotton Cancer Center. We're going to calculate the attendees today and announce the winner of this fun prize in the follow-up email tomorrow, so you can stay tuned. Thank you again for all of your continued support, particularly during this very challenging time in the world. As too many of us know firsthand, cancer has not stopped during the pandemic, and our cancer center hasn't paused for a moment. We've remained steadfast in efforts to find new solutions to cancer through groundbreaking research, and also by providing patients a positive environment for treatment, cure, and recovery. So many of these projects and advancements have been made possible because of your philanthropic support. Your support as sponsors, volunteers, participants, donors, and more further our mission of the Friends. Our mission is to support Dartmouth's Norris Cotton Cancer Center by raising funds for cancer research and patient supportive services, by increasing awareness of our NCI-designated comprehensive cancer center, and by acting as ambassadors for the Cancer Center and the community it serves. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Steve Leach to share more about what your support is helping to make possible at the Cancer Center. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Leach, the Director of the Cancer Center and the Preston T. and Virginia R. Kelsey Distinguished Chair in Cancer at the Geisel School of Medicine at Dartmouth. Dr. Leach.
Thanks so much, Jacqueline, and hi, everybody. I wish we could be together as we typically are to celebrate our corporate sponsors in person. I want to thank Jacqueline and acknowledge her on what may be her first kind of public appearance as the new Executive Director of the Friends of the Norris Cotton Cancer Center. You will all see in coming days, weeks, months, and hopefully years and decades, just what a wonderful addition Jacqueline is going to be to our team. So welcome, Jacqueline. And thank you to all of our corporate partners for help making this year's very unusual Proudy a roaring success beyond all of our wildest dreams. While a lot of philanthropy lied fallow during the height of the COVID crisis, and certainly event-based fundraising became very, very difficult for most institutions, our community, including you, our corporate sponsors, stepped up and made this Proudy incredibly successful and incredibly memorable. I've always said that I've never, ever, ever encountered a cancer center that's so well supported by its community, and our local and national corporate partners are a big part of that. So thanks to all of you. The Cancer Center continues to do all its work and did so through the height of the COVID crisis. While we were never overwhelmed with large numbers of COVID patients here in the Upper Valley, cancer didn't give our cancer patients a rest, nor did it give our dedicated physicians, nurses, and cancer center staff a rest. So even while much of the medical center shut down to about 50% capacity to make room for an onslaught of COVID patients and to keep everybody safe, our cancer center really barely slowed down, never getting much below about 85% of our normal volumes. And I'm just so proud of our providers and our staff in terms of just showing incredible commitment and dedication to taking care of our cancer patients, even when we were initially short on PPE, on masks and gloves and the like. We didn't waver. We took care of folks in our community, and so it's with real pride that I look back on those months. We are now at 110% of normal volumes because people had their cancer diagnoses postponed a bit, in the sense of having mammograms and colonoscopies and visits to their primary care doctor postponed. And we're now seeing a big increase in new cancer diagnoses as we catch up on those patients. So we're very, very busy here taking care of patients in the Upper Valley and beyond. A big part of the lesson from COVID is that some of what we do can be delivered through telemedicine. And we got up to about 50% of all of our patient encounters delivered through telemedicine at the height of the crisis. And that's now down around 20%. And where it settles out exactly is unclear. But I think some component of it is here to stay and will serve our rural catchment area well in terms of hopefully avoiding long driving times for at least some patients some of the time. And all the while, our Cancer Center continues to be a source of incredible pride and just further strengthening my conviction that we are one of a kind in doing big city comprehensive cancer center level research, providing big city comprehensive cancer center level care, but doing it with a small town face, a community facing commitment to taking care of our neighbors with the most compassionate, most patient and family centered care. And just a couple more examples of that. So we found out this year that amongst the 51 National Cancer Institute designated comprehensive cancer centers, our center ranks number 6 amongst all 51 in innovation as measured by the number of National Cancer Institute funded biotech startup companies, the way that we take our Norris Cotton Cancer Center discoveries and deliver them to the world. We're behind only MD Anderson, Johns Hopkins, Duke, UC San Diego, and Stanford. We are in the heavyweight class when it comes to our research, and these recent rankings bore this out. But we're also lead the way in, as I said, compassionate patient and family-centered care. And so just last month, we received perhaps the ultimate vindication of that. We were awarded the Press Ganey Pinnacle of Excellence Award in Patient Experience, a national award that was given to only 10 of the top comprehensive cancer centers in the country based on sustained excellence in patient satisfaction, in which we've scored above the 95th percentile of all healthcare delivery institutions nationally for 3 straight years. A real honor to our providers, our physicians, our nurses, our staff, our secretaries, the folks who sit at the front desk, that we were honored with this national award when it comes to patient satisfaction. So big city, comprehensive cancer center level care, but with this small town community face, neighbors taking care of neighbors, is what makes us unique. A couple more just quick updates on the research side. Jason Ferris, a new faculty member, a new member of our cancer center, is a medical, GI medical oncologist who moved with his young family here to the Upper Valley from Boston. And he's just set the place on fire. He's our new director of early phase clinical trials. And just within months of his arrival, he landed an $800,000 grant from the NCI to bring our clinical trials and make them ever more available close to where patients live in one of our 5 affiliate member sites of the Norris Cotton Cancer Center. This one with a focus on bringing clinical trials to the folks of Northern Vermont, way up in St. Johnsbury. The NCI awarded 6 of these grants, and 4 of them went to big city cancer centers to try and bring clinical trials to people of the inner city. 2 went to more rural cancer centers, one at Wake Forest in North Carolina, and the other one was us, to bring clinical trials to rural communities. And Jason has just led the way in this effort. Another success of Jason's is he launched and now has successfully activated the first in-human clinical trial of a new immune checkpoint inhibitor. Again, it was our cancer center that launched MedRx back in the 90s, the company that went on to develop ipilimumab and nivolumab, 2 of these revolutionary immune checkpoint inhibitors that have transformed the world of cancer therapy. And now one of our investigators, Randy Noel, followed up on that early MedRx success and discovered a new immune checkpoint and developed a new antibody to block it. And Jason has now opened a clinical trial so that our patients here in the Upper Valley will be among the first in the world to receive this exciting new immune checkpoint inhibitor to treat their cancers. And finally, and it's been just so exciting to see the successful launch of our CAR T program. And Ken Meehan is about to tell you more about that. This extends our longstanding world leadership in cancer immunotherapy and now allows us to bring a state-of-the-art cellular immunotherapies to our patients and neighbors here in the Upper Valley. And this is a story that Ken is going to tell you about more today. So before I introduce Ken, let me just again thank our corporate sponsors. We couldn't do it without you. We couldn't be a comprehensive cancer center in a rural location, delivering this big city cancer care, doing this big city cancer research without our corporate sponsors and without the incredible support of our entire community. So once again, thanks, and I look forward to thanking you all in person as soon as we're able. So with that, let me introduce Ken Meehan, who was the honorary co-chair for this year's remarkably successful 2020 virtual Proudy. Ken is one of the most highly respected and accomplished members of our cancer center, a true physician investigator, a physician scientist, and a physician leader. He is professor of medicine at Dartmouth's Geisel School of Medicine. He's director of our bone marrow transplant program here in the Cancer Center, and he co-directs our Cancer Center Immunology and Cancer Immunotherapy Research Program, which has been the site from which so many discoveries have emanated. And he's going to tell you about CAR T cells, this revolutionary new therapy that we're now making available to folks here in the Upper Valley. So take it away, Ken.
I'm sorry. Welcome, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here. And thank you, Steve and Jacqueline, so much. And I personally want to thank the corporate sponsors and the Proudy sponsors. As a laboratory investigator and a clinical investigator, I've been the recipient of funds with my research. And you'll see some of the data that I present today. I'll emphasize what was funded by Proudy. And we could not have done this without the corporate sponsorship. So I'd like to thank you for that. So when Steve asked me to present something innovative, new, etc., I jumped at the opportunity because I'm going to present CAR T cell therapy, and I'll start my slides here in a moment. It's a new innovative treatment. It's using a patient's own immune system to kill tumor cells. And this is so new that there are only 3 locations in New England, and we're lucky to be one of those 3 that offer this. But it offers such high response rates in patients that have been reluctant or haven't been, I should say, refractory to all type of therapy. So let me start these slides. Okay, so I'm going to talk about CAR T cell therapy. And what I mean by CAR T cell therapy is chimeric antigen receptor T cell therapy. So you can see why we call it CAR T cell therapy. It's just a complicated term. And what we mean by that is we can actually take a patient's own cells, they're called T cells, place genetic material inside the middle of that cell. You'll see it in a moment. And then as those cells grow and develop into new cells, they'll express new surface markers. And those surface markers recognize tumor cells. So we can then give those cells back to patients, and whatever genetic material we put into that cell determines the marker on the surface of that cell. And those cells will then go into the patient, circulate in the body, and attack the tumor cell. So before I explain actually how that works, let me give you just a little bit of background on this CAR T cell therapy. So this is Emily Whitehead. So Emily was diagnosed at age 5 with a specific type of leukemia called acute lymphoblastic leukemia. She went into remission, and then unfortunately 2 years later, she relapsed. And with that relapse, she received multiple different regimens, experimental regimens, etc. At that time, in 2012, there was this new development called a CAR T cell. So the investigators, and this was at Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, said, well, why don't we try this therapy, see if it works? It's our last hope. And Emily was the very first person in the world that received this CAR T cell therapy. And this was 2012. Jump ahead now, 7 years later. This is Emily. And I can't see the quote because I have a box in my way here. But basically, Emily has now started a foundation. It's called the Emily Whitehead Foundation. And as you can see, she's cancer-free. And she uses this organization to help other people with cancer, children and adults. And her quote, which I love, is always remember to never give up and smile every day. And Emily presented at our national conference a year ago in May. It's called the American Society of Clinical Oncology. Basically, she was there to show people that this CAR T cell therapy is innovative, it's new, it works. And again, keep in mind, she was refractory to all type of therapy known at that time. And this is just one example of how well this therapy works. Just one other example. Tori Lee, 5 years old, again, was diagnosed with ALL, relapsed 5 years later, failed all types of therapy, and now 2018, 2019, she's doing great. And this is a story taken from Reader's Digest. So this innovative therapy now has hit the lay press. Again, the reason for that is it's a whole different way of treating cancer. It's using a patient's immune system to fight cancer. Well, let me show you a little bit about how CAR T-cell therapy started here at Dartmouth. And we were part of the groundbreaking study. So Charles Sentman, an immunologist here at the Cancer Center, way back in 2004. And again, this is a great example. Prouty funds were used to provide some of this research. Well, he started studying these CAR T cells way back in 2004. And I won't go into a lot of detail, but basically he took a cell, and it was called a CD8 T cell, and he inserted genes into that cell. So those CD8 T cells would express a specific type of marker, and that marker is called an NKG2D. Again, the name isn't important, it's the concept that's important. But these cells that were developed in the laboratory, he then was able to infuse them into mice. And what will happen is once that cell has the marker on the surface, it will get into a mouse, recognize the tumor cell by that marker, and kill that tumor cell. And again, a great example of how Prouty funds spurred some of this innovative research. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this research in a moment, but let me first explain how in the past now 16 years, a number of investigators here at the Cancer Center have been involved in this research, and these CAR T cells now have been commercialized, and they're being used, again, started right here, right in the sixth floor boardwalk by Dr. Sentman. They're being used internationally in phase 2 trials for various malignancies. But let me tell you a little bit of how these CAR T cells work. So the first thing we do is we take the T cell and we use just viral DNA and insert it into that cell. And again, depending upon what type of DNA we put into that cell, that'll determine what markers are presented on the surface of that T cell. So these new markers are called the CAR, or chimeric antigen receptors. And those markers that are now expressed on the T cells will recognize any type of tumor, but depending upon what DNA we put in, it'll determine what tumor it recognizes. So we can take those T cells, bring them to the laboratory, put in DNA, those cells will then express the marker. We can then infuse those cells into patients. And what will happen is those T cells with the marker will connect to the tumor cells. That's how specific they are. But what's even more creative is these cells, the T cells will kill the tumor, but they'll also recruit other immune cells of the patient to fight and kill the tumor as well as surrounding tumor cells. So what will happen is other immune cells within the patient will release these chemicals to kill the tumor cell. So that's how it works, but how does it work in patients? So let's say we have a patient, for example, with lymphoma. We try to get the patient into remission. Once they're in remission, we can collect cells from them, and we just use blood cells, peripheral blood cells. Those cells are then sent off to a company, and what the company will actually do is insert DNA material into that cell, so those cells express the specific markers that will recognize this patient's tumor cells. And then those cells are put into what we call culture. They grow in the laboratory for 10 or 14 days until we end up with billions of cells, billions of those tumor-fighting cells. And why these cells are expanding in the laboratory, we actually admit the patient to the hospital, give them chemotherapy just so they won't reject the cells they're given, and then we infuse the cells into patients. And as you can imagine, I'm oversimplifying it. It's a very, could be a difficult course for the patients. It took us about 12 to 18 months here at the hospital to prepare for this. Training, education, We trained the emergency room physicians, we trained the ICU nurses, anything you could think of, a lot of education. And we were happy to say that in about March, April this year, we treated our first patient. And what does this look like? Well, this is actually a slide of a tumor cell being killed by a CAR T cell. And you can actually see how that CAR T cell attaches to the tumor by those tentacles. And then that CAR T cell recruits the other cells in the area to attack and kill that tumor cell, as well as surrounding tumor cells. Well, let's get back to Dr. Sentman. So as I mentioned to you, Dr. Sentman started some of this research back in 2004, again, with some Prouty funds. And since that time, he has commercialized these cells. These cells are now being used in clinical trials around the world to treat patients with leukemia and myeloma. And we're happy to say that it was just 18 months ago where one of our major organizations, the American Society of Cancer Research, said that Dr. Sentman's CAR T cells, quote, this is the first time that CAR T cells have ever worked on acute myeloid leukemia, meaning putting patients with refractory disease, that's disease that's not responding to therapy, into remission. So we're very, very proud of this, this accomplishment. As I mentioned to you, we treated our first patient in late March of this year. And this is our patient, Kim. Kim is here with his wife, Nancy, and he's actually allowed us to use his photo, allowed us to use his story. Kim is a great example of how this therapy works. So Kim has lymphoma that was refractory to 3 previous lines of therapy. And he was trying to find a center, a location that would try to get him into remission. He visited Boston, he visited us, and he was our first CAR T patient, and we treated him in March. And I'm happy to say that this is a photo just from last week. He's in remission. And not only that, he's so happy and so proud of this. He participated in the virtual Prouty this year. So this is an accomplishment that, you know, it really puts a name and a face to the therapy. But this is how innovative, how creative the therapy can be for us. So what I'd like to do is stop there, and there's a very short video here explaining how these CAR T cells work by Dr. Sentman.
One of the newest things in cancer therapy is the idea that we can harness the immune system to attack cancer. So how do we make that work? Immune cells are really good at recognizing things that are really different, like bacteria or viruses. And tumors are basically normal cells that grow too much. So CAR T cells have been a remarkable way to treat cancers and even patients that are very ill. The CAR is for chimeric antigen receptor, which is basically a fancy way of saying if we take 2 pieces or 3 pieces of normal proteins and put them together, sort of like it becomes a chimera. Think of it like in the dark you don't see much. But if you put on night vision goggles, you suddenly see all sorts of things. And so we're essentially providing a new set of goggles for your immune cells to now recognize tumors and then attack them in a way that they couldn't do it before. So the thing that makes our CAR T cell approach a bit different is that we're basing it off of some natural receptors that can target up to 80 or 90% potentially of human tumors. So not just hematological tumors, but breast cancer, prostate cancer, colon cancer, some brain cancers. Currently, our first one is in clinical trial against 7 kinds of cancers, both in the US and in Europe. It's a big challenge going from this idea in a lab to getting into the clinic to treat patients. There is this term, the valley of death. And so this is where you have an idea and it gets so far, and then it can't go any farther because it requires a lot of money, and yet it's hard to generate that. The bit of philanthropy can allow you to get the data to move to the next phase, make it to the next step. Dartmouth has been great about helping us to partner with industry to move things forward. You're not going to make a difference working on easy problems, right? You have to go for the hard ones. And this is an environment that allows you to do that.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Mia and Dr. Leach. And if you can both join us back on video, we are now able to open it up for questions. And we do have a few in the chat. So if others have more that you've thought of, please feel free to enter them right in the chat with us. But first question for Dr. Meehan, what forms of cancer does CAR T-cell therapy work best for today? And what types of cancers could it work for moving forward in the future?
That's a great question. At the current time, the FDA has approved CAR T-cell therapy for leukemia and lymphoma. But as I mentioned in the lecture, whatever type of genetic material put into that cell then has a receptor on its surface that can recognize any sort of tumor cell. So to answer your question, theoretically, any tumor type could be treated with CAR T-cell therapy. So having said that, every single malignancy, there are about 155 trials that the government's running now in every single type of malignancy, looking to determine how efficacious CAR T-cell therapy is. At the current time, at least in preliminary studies, it looks like blood cancers are the most susceptible rather than solid tumor studies. So blood cancers being leukemia, lymphoma, myeloma. But there are studies in lung cancer, prostate cancer, breast cancer, any sort of solid tumor type. Matter of fact, the photo that I showed of the tumor cell being attacked by CAR T cells, that was a breast cancer cell in the laboratory.
Thank you. Another question, how long does it take for recognition in the patient to take place?
So these are great questions. The recognition actually takes place immediately. And we know that because when we infuse cells, we could actually see something called cytokine storm. So if you remember that cartoon I showed, when the T cell attacks the tumor cell, it releases all these little chemicals. And we actually see that in patients. When we give the cells to patients, within an hour, these patients can develop fevers, increased heart rate, increased blood pressure because of these chemicals. So the reaction is immediate, and then you're hoping that it's long-term because that's what keeps patients in remission. It is a complicated course, so we do keep people in the hospital for 14 days just to monitor for any potential side effects. And then the FDA mandates that patients need to stay in the area for 30 days. So an additional 16 days as an outpatient, and we see them 7 days a week just to monitor for any toxicity or side effect.
Great, thank you. Another great one. Do CAR T cells work the same for melanomas and other skin cancers?
So there are clinical trials looking at all solid tumors, including melanoma. Those are not FDA approved yet, but there are trials specifically looking at, as I mentioned, all other type of solid tumors, including melanoma. Yes.
Great. Thank you. I believe that concludes all of our questions that we currently have in our Q&A box. So if any other come to mind in the next few minutes with our attendees, please feel free to enter them in. But thank you both so much for sharing all of this exciting work that's being done. And thank you for all of your work to make it happen and really being a leader in this fight for all of us. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks to everyone.
A pleasure. Thank you. And thanks to the friends and the corporate sponsors too.
As so many of us know, as we've talked about, 2020 has been a challenging year with the world, as I like to say, turning upside down in February and March. But one thing that stayed true was this community, the community for the Friends, for the Prouty, and for the life-saving work that's happening at the Norris Cotton Cancer Center. For all of you joining us today, thank you so much for your leadership, for your donations, for your sponsorships, for volunteering, for participating. You know, we pivoted quickly, taking our signature Prouty to a virtual event. And as Dr. Leach mentioned, we could not have been more pleased with the response. So I'm going to bring back the chat request, but we want to know how you Proudied this year. So many of you participated on your own and really made it your own. Please tell us in the chat how you Proudied. And I would like to, while you're entering those, take a moment to give a shout out to a few of our corporate partners that shared their virtual participation in the Proudy with us. and sent some really great photos. So thank you, Team Bristol-Myers Squibb, for your support and all of your participation. Team Hypertherm participating with us in the virtual Proudy. Team Swish Out Cancer. And Team Conifer Health Solutions. Thank you, thank you, thank you, really for bringing this Proudy virtual event to life. I see some golfed. We know that others rode their bicycles many, many miles. Some took to hiking trails. What do we see here? Rode with a small group for 100 miles. Wow. 107 miles. We've got some dedicated participants. Thank you so much, really, for carrying through the tradition and the spirit of the Proudy. You know, together we raised $4.1 million for the Friends in support of this life-saving research and meaningful patient and family supportive services. Your philanthropic support fuels our comprehensive cancer center. So thank you so much. We are very excited to celebrate our 40th year of the Friends next year and the 40th year of the Proudy 2021. While no one knows what July next year is going to look like just yet, we have already begun preparing for our 40th celebration. So please stay tuned for more details in the coming months. We are exploring all options to bring this event to life for you in many different ways, and we look forward to it, and we couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much again for joining us today for this special event, and we hope that you all have a wonderful afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you in person very, very soon. Thank you.